Hello everyone. Can you hear me well?
Hey Breno, how's it going?
Hi Cole, how you doing?
Doing good.
Hey guys. All right, so this is Vertex Game Dev Live. First, I introduce myself. We're going to be talking today about porting assets from multiple DCC apps, including Unity, a little bit of Blender, some Maya. So it should be interesting. If I had more time, we would definitely talk about ZBrush and other apps. I think we won't have that much time, but yeah, let's take the best of the time we have. The format of this presentation will be around 1 hour and a half, and I'll reserve about half an hour for questions. And so yeah, make sure to write them down, and if I don't see them immediately, you can drop them in chat so that they won't be missed. But yeah, I'll answer them at the end of presentation, right? So, and feel free to come up with your questions. Okay. So, let's start with myself introducing me. So, let me share my screen real quick. Okay, so yeah, Vertex School is a new Unreal Engine authorized training center. And DDP is the game developer program. We got other programs like digital arts and tech artist. Some of which I lecture on as well. And to introduce myself, usually I like to leap straight into the presentation, but people say that's not, super polite. I should introduce myself. So, all right. What have I done? I've been a modeler and 3D animator since 1996. I have modeled for some pretty big digital games, actually, including for mobile devices, um, Nintendo DS platforms, animating puppies and such. So yeah, very fun times. I've also been Electronic Arts Los Angeles contractor up to 2010, mostly focusing on their RTS games lineup, including Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth 1 and 2, Command and Conquer 3 and 4. And those are some of the images of those games. If you guys are not into real-time strategy, it's still a good feast for the eyes, even more than a decade after their release. They're still being actively played and modded, and yeah, pretty agitated and happy community over there. I've also been the producer of the Taikadom. It's a space MMO, pretty large scale. That was released. The first release was in 2009. It had further releases after that, including in China. Um, yeah, back then it was a big IBM server and a custom engine. So yeah, pretty crazy times. People were pretty skeptical about um, Unity was considered a toy engine back then, and it's kind of curious to bring these facts in light of historical perspective just changed so much, and actually Unreal Engine already existed, like was early days. Obviously, it was like a couple years after release, the first release of Unreal Engine, and it was a really, really expensive engine. If memory doesn't fail me, Unreal Engine cost about 1.5 million US dollars for you to get a license for your studio. So yeah, not cheap at all. So yeah, it wasn't an option. Most studios, especially not the biggest budget ones, they prefer to build their own engines for obvious reasons, right? But yeah, obviously Unity changed all of that, and eventually Unreal Engine caught up, and we got an even better business model for Unreal Engine nowadays than we get for Unity. I've also been in Unity as a store top seller. I've sold a couple really important packages related to vector drawing, including race tools, 2D vector drawing, and animated animation package. And yeah, that was based upon raised spline, which I also maintained and kept releasing for about 4 years. I've been a producer and senior developer of more than 20 games. I don't know the exact number. Pardon me. For Apple Developer Academy, that's Apple US sponsored project in some units around the world. Here in Brazil, they had it. They started that in our unit in Curitiba, Paraná State, and yeah, really cool project with people from multiple diverse areas, including medicine and engineering, just gathering to build cool apps. And many of them were games, and I were in charge of those games as producer and also leading the technical aspect of development. I've also been a PUCPR University professor for their digital games graduation course, which is top three digital games course here in Brazil for 10 years. So yeah, pretty proud of all we've done there. And I also got a master's in computer vision for the same by the same university in 2018. More recently, I've been founder and studio manager of the First Foundry, multinational studio here in Brazil, up for 8 years. I did pre-production for some games there, um, including but not exclusively Crypto Unicorns, which is a pretty fun game. If you guys want to look that up, it's pretty interesting. But yeah, and after that, well, actually intended in parallel, I founded my own studio, the Fluid Play Studios, which I'm a creative lead and studio director up to these days. I'm currently the lead developer of Total Atomic Power, a real-time strategy game, because that's my roots. That's what I love doing. And yeah, it's a custom engine, but lots of C++ at the core of the engine and a Lua layer for scripting. So Unreal Engine was definitely not a stranger to me in terms of the technology that I was used to work on. And our program, our GDP program, basically there's three stages, which we split in terms. So the course overall takes about 9 months. And initially, you guys will learn C++ and create games with it without even touching Unreal Engine. The reason, even though some people ask about it, hey, why don't we start with blueprints? Blueprints are easier. But yeah, for you to learn blueprints, you need to learn Unreal Engine interface first and foremost, right? So that's already a barrier in a sense. You have a lot to learn from the Unreal Engine interface, and blueprints are a world on their own, but they work as a great bridge for you to learn a real C++ API. So our method involves detaching you a little bit from Unreal Engine so that you basically learn all the in and outs of the C++ language, which is not the simplest language. It's got many, you know, gotchas, including everything related to pointers, how to access content pointed by pointers and pointers of pointers, and those scary things which make the language kind of encryptic. But once you learn the principles of it, it starts getting fun. And we use Raylib, which is a really interesting game dev library to be able to build a couple cool games, which tend to make learning C++ more interesting and yeah, a better experience overall. So after you get those principles, you go and you learn a real engine interface, you learn blueprints in detail. We use it a lot. And we start connecting the dots that you need to learn the specific C++ API, which we start at the end of term two. And then we go into term three, full speed, and actually developing a large game with advanced concepts like GAS, which is game ability system, all the AI logic that you need, not just behavior trees, but also state trees and the most modern technology. We keep updating the program. So it's breakneck pace, trying to cope with Epic's release schedule, but that's one of the things that you can count that we'll keep doing for you. So it's not just old video tutorials of older versions that no longer work like that, nodes which changes their names. We do the hard work for you, and we basically give you those games. We show you that being done step by step, and basically you have those games done for you as a sample and learning not in a rushy fashion, really diving into the concepts and trying to actually understand what you're doing, not just following steps from copy and paste tutorial. And well, we could talk a lot about Unreal Engine, but I won't, spend you guys time on that. I want to go straight into um, the format that we use, which is meeting twice per week. Thursdays mostly for labs. So you have lots of time with the tutor or instructor um, live, to ask many questions and make sure that whatever project you're doing on the side, or if you're building the standard projects that we lecture, that you're actually getting your money's value for in terms of direct tutoring. Classes are small, they're limited in size, you have really short selection process, but yeah, we try to make sure that you're learning. That's number one um, idea. So we don't push people to deliver their work, but we try to make sure that whatever you need to get it completed, that it's done. Okay. And we have those and those schedules, right? We try to talk about assignments on Tuesdays. Yeah, and finally, why synchronous classes? I think that's important to mention. Content and knowledge is everywhere. I keep saying that. You go to YouTube, um, you go to the AI if you want, ChatGPT, and it's gonna answer you. It's like that's content and technical information. Technical information is everywhere, but production experience is not. Actually being able to guide you through, all the obstacles which you may find during serious game development, challenge that you may find to be hired by a top game company. Those are the challenges which synchronous classes are targeted to overcome. So really listening to you, what do you want to do with this? How do you want to carry on with your learning process? What's your goal in life? Do you want to do that as a hobby? Do you want to actually build your dream game? Hopefully it's not an MMORPG because those are incredibly hard, especially if you're alone. So I wouldn't recommend that, but you might have a more reasonable dream. And yeah, we want to make sure that you're heard and you're learning from our experience, how to, uh, what's the easiest path to get there. So yeah, life questions, driving the content direction interactively, not just passively taking content, which sometimes gets sleepy and it's not upgradable, like videos don't upgrade themselves, right? And so yeah, being able to get those live questions responded is one of our top differentiators, I would say, from other classes, right? So yeah, live sessions for assistance and project guidance. That's what we do regularly, especially on Thursdays, but even out of the scheduled times. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. If you have specific questions, even before we move on, of course, you might have questions about the course itself, and I could keep going on, but I want to get a really quick show of hands from you guys. Like, who of you have got experience with Unreal Engine? It doesn't need to be top experience, but I've played with it. I built something simple with it. Yeah, please raise your hands. Yeah, there's a button there for, I think it's, yeah, there you go. So we got Phil. Matthew, you're lying. I know you do rewind it pretty well. Yeah, there's this React, I think it's React button, right? Or is that in channel? Hey Matt, how are you doing? Yeah, Matthew is one of our students from GDP 12. We're gonna be checking on actually we'll be playing with one of the projects that we're working on now. Okay, that's good. That's good. Pretty good amount of you have already played with Unreal Engine. If you can lower that, unless it's the same answer for the next question, which is how many of you have experience with other game engines and DCC apps? Could be just Blender or just Unity or Godot. I expect a bit more of you to have already, maybe Maya or just Unity or Godot. Yeah, Brett is used to many. Starting from Quake. That was my first one as well. Jeff said Blender, Unity, and Godot experience. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, Jeff, I played a lot with Unity and Godot myself. Unity mostly. Godot is really, really fun to work on. it's a slightly different perspective, right? Each engine has its own perspective. Cool. 3ds Max and Unity. All right. Okay, so I believe most of you have got some experience with 3D DCC or digital content creation apps. Patterson's had his working with my Mudbox co-application as well. Mudbox has been barely updated by Autodesk recently, right? I haven't seen much coming from Autodesk in that aspect. I don't know if they just quit it or if they're moving most of the sculpting tooling into Maya or what's their go with that. Sometimes Autodesk is kind of cryptic. I remember right before they killed Softimage, one of the programs they supported, because they acquired the program, they said they would keep it, and like 6 months after that they canceled it. So yeah. Um, yeah, Substance Painter is a pretty cool application. We won't be diving into Substance Painter today, but I want to show another program which is pretty cool called Nald, Knald. Not sure if you guys ever played that, but it's really to the point, and since it's it's a short presentation, it's what we'll be playing with today. All right, good to know. So yeah, I hope you guys got the best value possible from the presentation, and make sure to keep adding questions for the end of the class. I'll get back to the list gladly. All right, so let me start this. Am I sharing my screen yet? I think so. Yeah, okay. So let me reduce bandwidth and turning off my camera because now I'm gonna kill my machine, aka running Unreal Engine. Just kidding. It's a pretty heavy app. I won't lie that to you. So yeah, let me shut it down and open it again. No need to save it. All right, so let's start by looking. Let me get a couple notes over here so I don't miss important topics that I've stored to talk to you guys. Okay, so yeah, let's open Unity. Let's start from it. So it's an Unreal presentation that we will be starting from Unity. Yeah, because I'm feeling brave today. All right, so I got a project here. Basically, I want to show how I migrate some assets from the project to to an Unreal Engine project. So I might need to skip a couple steps, but I try to do pretty much the same that I do in any project. Like I've ported uh, assets from the tanks demo games to use in the first project that we work on. And also this the zombie shooter asset pack. Let's see what's the latest. I think either that or that one. Probably that one. Let's see. If it's the wrong one, I quickly know. Remove my desktop. Okay. So yeah, that wasn't the one that I wanted to show you guys. But yeah, anyways, let's start from this. Basically, that was a quick sample scenario from a Unity game. It uses a tile set, which I really like. It ain't, high tech, but the fact that it's low poly and easy for you to create modular mazes really interests me. It's called Dinky Dungeon Tile Set. You may be able to find it still in some places to be sold, but not in the asset store. But yeah, it's commercial, so don't count on me sharing that with you publicly. But I have other options which we'll be playing with today. Okay, so anyways, how does that work? Basically, exporting a full scene like that pre-assembled to Unity would require a custom tool. But if you want, like I wanted, just the assets, there are a couple of strategies which you may use. So first, of course, you want to find the asset, right? So you can just select it and it's going to scroll straight to in the project view. So here I have the prefab. Of course, the prefab has its own sets of meshes assigned to them. After all, it's a prefab. It's like in Unreal Engine would be a blueprint, right? And there are many ways for you to build blueprints, including with child actors, child static meshes, and they don't behave exactly like prefabs in Unity, right? The people think they can get into Unreal and say, hey, it's just like prefabs. Not really. It's more like a class. It's more like a script than actually a hierarchy of objects which have their own list of components for every sub item, which is what Unity does. That's not how Unreal Engine does. It basically has um, a component list which is tied to the root, if I could put it like that. And the rest would be just for meshes. You're not supposed to have like a separate set of components for each sub mesh, unless they're child actors, which is another, its own can of worms. But anyways, if we start from here, if I look, for instance, for the collider, it'll take me to this folder here, and I'm basically getting the mesh data itself. Okay, so here we got the colliders as you saw, and all those small pieces. If I go and I edit, I click on this button, the actual prefab, you can see how many duplicates we have of torch walls, for instance, all those torches here, and then you got the walls and the solid walls, the support beams, stone frame, right? So, and those are most usually comprised of its own set of replicated or common pieces. So, for instance, torches, if you have those separately, of course, you're missing out on instantiating or having copies which are linked to prefabs. Since this asset's pretty old, it still didn't use prefab nesting, which is a more modern feature in Unity, which definitely saves up on draw calls. And that's one of the major performance implications of having too many materials, too many light sources if you're not using the right light settings or lighting settings. So, but yeah, if I export it like as it is, let me get back here. It basically is going to send it like that with all the uh, duplicated parts. And if that's what you want to do, it's fine. It's what I'll be showing you guys. It's definitely the easiest way. So I'm just gonna get mesh data. And from game object, if you have the FBX exporter, you have this export FBX option. So let me show, of course, I already did that in this project, but let me show you how you would do that. Go to Window, then you go to Package Manager, and you search. You have to wait a little bit as it refreshes the list. Once it's done, if you haven't got it yet, of course I already do, you can literally go and search for the feature pack that you need. So for instance, if I search for FBX, you see the FBX exporter listed here, and it's currently installed. It's the latest version, so I don't have to update it, and all good. Otherwise, you just click on that, download, install, and you're done. Okay, you really need FBX to work properly inside Unreal Engine. So to import assets in the best way possible. Otherwise, you lose the hierarchy. If you use OBJ, for instance, you cannot use the hierarchy. So from that, I'm just selecting the asset on this. Oh, Breno, could I use the prefab? Well, you could. Actually, you could. If it shows export to FBX, it's going to allow you to do that. So let's use this one from the instance here, which is actually an instance from prefab. So it shows you the source, etc., the name it's going to use, and where it's going to export to by default at the root of your project, right? Of this assets folder here in project. So I just use large room one door. I call it two just because I think there's already one there. Okay, so I'll leave the default and I click export. All right, so let me go to the assets folder just by right clicking here and show and export. And within assets, we should get this large room on door two. Like I said, already had the previous expo. Okay, so I don't need the meta, I just need the FBX. And then we start our path into trying to import that into our Unreal Engine project. So I'm moving that to my other monitor and I'll minimize it. Let's go to our Unreal Engine project. I didn't open it. Nope, let me do it now. Unreal Engine. From here, I go to my projects and let me select. I use GDP12's Vampire Ripper. Why? Because um, it's a more shaped up project than the one we're still working in GDP13. So we have the cohorts. Basically, we're going, we slowly build up the AI process, then, setting up the scenario, then the particles, and yeah, basically this one is is more advanced and it's gonna show us. I'll be able to show you guys some tricks about performance optimization as well. I know it's not the goal here. We already had our optimization class, but talking about art optimization would require its own presentation or a couple, really. But at least I'll be able to share a couple tips. All right, so as it opens up, don't be scared. I know, looks ugly. I'm still clearing that one up. Usually I try to get my blueprints really pretty. So yeah, here you can basically see the same asset that you were seeing in Unity. It's the same. Believe me, it's the same. I know it looks better, but that's because of Unreal Engine. It's not because of the asset itself. Um, and yeah, I already have, particles and I've set up the lights, etc., etc. But yeah, how did I get here? So first, let me just get to this 3D folder and I'll add, yeah, I use this castle folder, just testing some things earlier today in this folder. I know it's not the right term, it should be like dinky, whatever. But what I do is I basically drag this guy inside here, or I could click on import and select the file. It's basically the same. And something bad will probably happen, and don't be scared. I'll show you guys how to fix it. If it doesn't happen, I'll be surprised, to be honest. But might happen. You never know when things go better than expected. All right, so here's the import source. Basically, you have to say if it's got animation or not. If it's got animations, it automatically detects that there are no animations there. And I usually don't touch the other options, right? It would take some time to explain all those options and uh, what would you use in which situation, so I won't get in there. I just use the defaults, just making sure there's no animations, but the static meshes, which are basically the meshes which do not deform using skinning or bones, right? This definitely has to be imported. You can try forcing, but usually it's not needed. Let's just click on import and let's see what happens. Okay, it told me the import is done. Let's see if that's real. I select castle again. I'm not seeing anything. Are you guys seeing something? I'm not seeing anything. So let me try using the import button. Maybe it goes better, right? I use Control G, which is a shortcut for this application that I use on Windows called Listery. If you guys haven't heard of it, it's a pretty great app. That's the name, Listery. It gives you a shorthand way, a shortcut for you to access the previously selected folder on any Explorer windows and other useful things like double tapping control and searching for an app and running it straight from where you are, things like that. Yeah, kind of reminds me of OS X since I worked with Macs for too long. Obviously, I really like this app. All right, so I select large room on door two. The size to me seems right. So yeah, just click on open. Let me try force instead of meshes. Maybe it was, not working because of that. Let's see. And import done, and I don't see anything again. Okay, so this is even better than usually you get when you export assets from Unity, especially older Unity versions. And why is that? Okay, there's something called the interchange framework, and I'm pretty sure I have even disabled that here. And let me show you guys what is that. Let me go to edit, plugins, interchange framework. Okay, yeah, that one is enabled. So with that guy on, which is pretty new to the Unreal Engine ecosystem, most of the FBX assets exported before when the 2020 FBX version became the norm, they do not import correctly. Sometimes they fail silently, sometimes they fail period, like badly with an output log telling you that the file is empty or other crazy error message like that. The interchange editor was actually implemented to facilitate importing assets from Fab. And if you search for Fab here, you see it's off. That's why I don't get the Fab button here, right? But, and even with that enabled, it's basically getting in the way of my importing. I'm not saying do not use interchange. It's pretty good. It's awesome for you guys to get things from Fab. You get access to OpenUSD, which the previous importer does not allow you to use. It's a universal scene descriptor format. It's a very, very powerful format which exports the entire scene from Blender or Maya with lighting and everything, and brings it properly with all lights set up, everything. So I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying that it's a bit broken for older FBX versions. Well, it's pretty broken. I can't lie, sorry. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna open another project first, right? In which I have already disabled that. When you disable the interchange framework, it disables a bunch of plugins which rely on it. Okay. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time. So I basically have this separate project which I use basically to import things. And why am I doing that? Because you want to disable the interchange framework on your projects. Like you want to use Fab, you want to use this, you want to use that, right? So it wouldn't be the wisest thing. Let me delete those. We will do that from scratch in a bit. So as you can see, I did manage to import my assets here. And like this one, right? It's another piece from the same tile set. So if you go to, let me maximize this a little bit. I don't like maximizing all of it because sometimes it blocks, when I'm using Zoom, it blocks my access to the toolbar. So that's why I leave a little bit of an edge when I'm streaming. But anyways, let me import it here and it should work unless I screwed up somewhere when I exported the asset. And then I migrate the asset into my newer projects, right? And that's a pretty safe approach because you're not forced to disable the interchange framework and all the cascading of plugins which rely on it, like Fab and the USD supporter, etc. So yeah, it's the basically that's the strategy that I recommend you guys to use. So again, let me drop the same file in here. And you see that the requester is the older one. That one was used, I believe, up to 5.2 or something. That was before Fab release. So it's from a couple of years ago, right? So yeah, and I won't change anything. I could enable, you see it already supported Nanite, which is the advanced geometry tessellator, which basically allows you to import an asset straight from ZBrush with millions of polygons and render it in real time. I know it sounds too good to be true for those of you who never heard about Nanite. That's exactly what it's made for and exactly what it does. And except for mobile platforms, it just works. Um, Breno, is it slower than bringing in an asset which is low poly and maybe tessellating it? Um, Actually, it's faster, but it's slower than a low poly mesh with a normal map. It's obviously slower than, a low poly mesh with, parallax mapping or any other strategy that you can use to fake depth. So each of the techniques have their place. And if you're building for mobile, for instance, you want the best possible performance, right? So I would not recommend using a night when you do not need it. So this asset here is already a pretty low poly. So I would have two options here. One, creating the displacement maps and basically apply displacement maps so I get, all the detail around the edges because parallax map here will only help you when you're close to it. It's going to give you the sense of depth much better than normal mapping, but it will not add detail to the edges. Okay. So, but yeah, if I have this really high density mesh, which I want to use as styling, then fine, build with that Nanite. That's not what I'll be doing here. So just leave it as defaults and I click import all. Yeah, it's complaining about name clashes, but it did reassign them. It's complaining about lack of smoothing groups because there's no option that I know of in the FBX exporter to generate them, but it's fine. It just recreates them internally. So don't care much about those warnings. They usually fix themselves. And here you have it. Okay, so a couple of questions might arise. When you import an asset like that, does it import with the materials? Well, let's just drag it into our level and see if it does. The thing is, the materials were previously created by myself when I first imported one of such assets into the project, right? So that's why it automatically found the materials instead of recreating them, which is a pretty cool feature in Unreal Engine. One thing that's worth mentioning is that differently from Unity, differently from Godot, you do not use the raw assets here. I'm not 100% sure about Godot, haven't played much with 3D in it, to be honest. But at least for Unity, what you store is the actual asset. So if I come in here, like I've shown you guys already, right? If I select the mesh and let me go to the actual FBX assets. If I do a show and explorer, it's going to be showing it's an OBJ actually. It's quite prehistorical. But yeah, it's got the source 3D file, right? That's not the same in Unreal Engine. You do not keep the source asset. So one of my recommendations is to not uh, maintain the files that you're going to be importing in the same folder as the project. It doesn't make sense. It's going to just bloat your project size, the actual project size. And for you to commit that and send that to GitHub, which is, a great way for you to store it on the cloud and so that you don't lose your work later, et cetera, you will definitely not want to have the source assets there. But those imported assets, they are pretty optimized. Let me show you guys. Well, actually, if you even point to it, you're going to see the total compressed size here, just 5 kilobytes, right? So um, many times you get a smaller size on the U asset. I think I can show that to you, open source location. Let's see that. Oh no, that's in the project. Sometimes it allows you to show that. That's in the folder view. Yeah, it's not opening it for some reason. Maybe it opened it in another Unreal project folder. Let's see. No, not that one. But yeah, that doesn't really matter. The thing is, it's here. If you look at the source file folder, it's gonna point to it, but that's not, you see, it's even in a Unity project. It's not inside Unreal. right? This just actually turns that into an UACID file on this, right? Of course, you can just go to content and search for it, right? With Show and Explorer. And um, yeah, basically within content, you'd be seeing like in 3D castle, and yeah, it's shown as empty just because did I import it to castle? I did, just because it just links, so it's not going to be showing you that here, right? But yeah, it's just the way that it stores the meshes and kind of like an index. If they're small enough, you won't see US, it's strictly visible there. So um, all right, so we got this inside our engine. The materials are already applied. If it was the first time I imported, you'd see the materials over here. And then I recommend you to just drop it into a child folder for materials. All right, so how do we work with that? Because there's so many duplicated parts, right? You look at it, you're like, wow, this is just the same mesh. It's just rotated and placed in a different place. Um, so how do I optimize that? How do I replicate that? Okay, so let's start from the beginning. First, let me get this guy. I'll delete it. And let's get this larger one specific guy and I just select. Actually, if you see, all the parts are here, okay, scattered. Okay, so let's see if I grabbed everything. Let me disable the vertex snapping. I'm gonna be showing you guys vertex snapping in a bit. All right, so all parts are here. And if you try to create the equivalent to a prefab so that you can, alt drag to be able to start building your modular maze, you might be a bit surprised that it won't work as easily as you might think. So if you just select everything like it did and go to, I don't know, maybe think, yeah, let's try right clicking and replace with something. No, let me try, well, maybe here where we have this awesome menu, which I always recommend to create blueprints. And maybe I do a convert selection to blueprint class. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so child actors, it'll be an actor, which basically it's like a game object if you're coming from Unity, like a replicatable entity, basically, which lives on a level or a scene. And the blueprint name, I like to start with that with VP and this huge name here, whatever. And that's the target folder. So just select. And like, okay, I just created a blueprint class. Fine. Let me drag it onto the scene and see what we got. Okay, cool. Let me double click that and see what we get. Um, okay, so I can't edit this. I double clicked it, it's not letting me. And I don't see the edit in blueprint option. There's a shared root. And well, I don't know what's going on here. So let me click here and see what's happening. Nothing. You see, well, it's showing me, okay, it opened that here. And all right, so here comes oh yeah, finally I got the root of the blueprint. Okay. So what's happening here is that you got a bunch of actors. Okay. The problem with that is actors are not as efficient, even though they have more possibilities. They're child actors, like I said before, and but they're not like static meshes. Static meshes are more performance. So here we basically have the equivalent to a static mesh, but there's no mesh assigned. All of those guys are actors. It's just like if you're spawning multiple game objects instead of having just meshes, if you make an analogy with Unity, so those are just meshes, this empty icon here, just meshes. They are more memory and performance efficient than if they were separate real game objects, even though Unity took some time to maximize performance when you do that. So this kind of works like a game object. Later, they added an option to hide the unused game object, especially from skinned meshes. But anyways, it's still better. And it is like a full-blown, because linked to prefabs, it's got more data assigned to it. And in here, we're basically paying for a price that we don't need. We are we're having all the trouble with the actor management, and we don't need all of that in a nutshell. Okay, so let me close that and let me do it in a different fashion. I will delete this guy because I want to use it. And let me get all of this spawned again. Select everything, drag it into the game, and I can just reset location. All right. And they're using the same pivot point. That helps a lot. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to find the floor, right? That's the floor object. And I'll deselect it by holding Control and clicking on it. So I got everything selected but the ground. So what I want to do is I want to make all those static meshes, this brick-like icon is for static meshes, which are the most performant type. And then I drag them into the floor so that I get at the roots the just the floor, and all the other parts are children of it. Okay. So what I'm going to be doing now is, again, I go in here. I do not recommend using this button. Like, it does pretty much the same, but I've had better luck in some circumstances using the top button for blueprint creation. The icon is the same as you're seeing. But as you can see, there are also more options for you to convert things. And then I use this convert selection to blueprint class option. But this time, instead of using child actors, I use harvest components, right? And you see that it starts from static mesh actor, which is good. And you can just use harvest components. Harvest components will do something very similar to what happens inside Unity. So if you're used to Unity's workflow, that's what you'll be opting for, right? And you see what I mean in a second. It'll basically recreate the hierarchy. So if there are children of children of children, like all the torches, etc., you can just use that. Okay. So yeah, let me give it a name again. BP larger than one. I think I forgot to select everything when I did it. Yeah, that's on me. I keep doing that for some reason. Okay, and for delete and do it again. Actually, it was linked to the to the floor, so delete the floor. No, I try to do that. Otherwise, I just import it again. No big deal. Something, unfortunately, I keep making the same mistake no matter how many times I do it. It's probably because explaining things and doing it at the same time is not the easiest thing ever. But anyways, okay, same deal. All right, so just drag everything inside, reset it again, and do it right this time. Control click the floor, drag things into floor, and make sure I select the hierarchy. So you can right click and select immediate children. Differently from other applications, this is not select all children. So if you want to select all children, you have to repeatedly click Control D or repeatedly click the this option here, right? But of course, I just have one level, so this works. And then I will again click here, your selection, harvest, and this time I use the actor. BP large room one, and yeah, that's it. And you see that now we only have one actor at the top, and the rest is static mesh. So that's a sensibly superior option to doing things, um, you know, just by, like you saw me doing before, where you have a bunch of actors nested. So this is a tip that I highly recommend. Let's see the torch walls. Where they? Mesh components. Are they here? Yeah, they are. Let me see them. Okay, so the torches are here. So next thing I'm gonna be doing is this. Let me um close this down. I'll leave this guy here, no problem. And what I'm gonna be doing is this. Let me actually I'll delete this too. I drop them again. Once again, I reset their position here in transform. But this time I'm gonna be doing this little trick. I'm gonna get all the torches applied to the wall. Hmm. And let me show you guys one thing. Actually, I should show that in the other project, but I think I can show that here as well. All right, so we come down here. That's the typical perspective if you using like a third person shooter game or maybe FPS, right? That's roughly what you'd be using, and probably not having that much light kicking into the into the scenery. But yeah, that's just a quick test. So okay, here at the eye icon, you have a bunch of viewport stats which you can enable, right? The simplest one is FPS. It shows you basically the frames per second and how much time it takes. In a nutshell, if anything uh, below 16 milliseconds, and I can pause here so you guys can see with no jittering, this is pretty good. It's below 16 milliseconds, so obviously I'm above 60 frames per second, which considering I'm uh, into the editor, which takes its own toll on performance, and I'm using Zoom. Okay, praise the Lord, praise my GPU. But that's not very common when you start populating your scene with multiple effects and particles, right? So one of the things that you want to keep a look at is not just FPS, but also um, the unit unit display, right? The unit display is going to show you much more information, including um, the GPU time, the draw time, RHIT. So those are, I won't get into all the details, but most importantly, because it's not an optimization presentation, but most importantly, you want to check what's taking more time. Because what you see commonly is you can think of that as the CPU, basically all the time that games taken to process the logic, which is like basically nothing here. But don't forget that Unreal Engine by itself, it's from 3 to 6 milliseconds, which, not negligible if you consider that you're shooting for 16. So that's pretty sensible. Um, but anyways, there's some overhead from the engine, some overhead from everything that's running here. So that's the CPU time basically. And then you have the time that it takes to draw things, right? So that's mostly the GPU time. So we have basically leeway in our GPU performance, and we're not bottlenecked, but what's taking our actual frame time, it's the CPU, not the GPU. Okay. So and you see that the whole frame time is basically it's the game processing time and just a little less than 0.001 milliseconds to connect this rendering with the logic, basically bridging GPU and CPU logic, right? So this is very good, but can we maintain that? That's the question. So for instance, let me do something like this. I zoom out and keep a look at, of course, let me re-enable the FPS, right? So you guys can see, because that one I know everybody understands if it's above or below 60 or above or below 30. And let me just start duplicating that. Oops, yeah, I optimized that in a second. I want to show you guys something first. I think you can do that with the blueprint actually. Let me do it. Um, EP large room. Okay. And I use the alt drag technique to create multiple copies here. All right. So as I get closer, this one is actually pretty hard to show because yeah, it's pretty speedy even with all the geometry going on. Because yeah, I basically have it sort of optimized with a single blueprint. So yeah, the difference usually when you go head on to a wall or you stay away from it, right? You can see that clear. I open the other project in a second, and you guys will see what I mean. So I just keep optimizing. I could say blindly because I didn't show you guys it losing performance, but yeah, I'll show you in a second the other project which I started showing where the performance drops quickly to 12 frames per second if you don't do things right. So I think it's a better example. But anyway, suppose I'm bottlenecked by too many copies of these shapes without actually without needing to keep them like that. So suppose those are the torches. I can get all the torches, and there are a couple things that you can do about it. Okay, so if they're actors by themselves, you can you have a bunch of options, right? Not just the regular snapping, etc. You can use merge actors here at the bottom. And there are a couple options which make your life simpler. The first one is merge. Basically, it'll just um, it's just like if you copied every mesh and created a new mesh in Blender or Maya or whatever. Okay, that's all it is really. Um, it's the best one for mobile simply because there's no mistakes. It just merges it. It's very simple. It's a new mesh file. It creates a new file, and you can use that in multiple situations. You can try simplify, which will bake textures, create a single atlas. That's mostly useful for when you're really combining multiple objects with different UV sets and different textures. So if I were like merging, the different arches and walls and the ground, then okay, it's gonna try and create a single UV atlas. It's the most destructive option too. And then you have the batch option, which is really cool. So let me show both to you, and I'll explain batch option a bit more in a sense. Let me start with merge. And like I said, it's going to create a new asset. So I go to 3D Castle and just call it merge torches. Or I could say, large run one torches to be more specific. Save it. Okay. And then it created this merged entity, and I can, drag it and center it, supposing the pivot is correct. And then I can get rid of the separate ones. Actually, I think they're still being rendered. Yeah, they're still being rendered. So let me just delete them, and you can see that we got the same visual result, but now it's a single draw call because the more draw calls you have, the worse the performance will get. So this is kind of optimization that you can do for multiple parts. So you can do that from imported assets even before you create your prefab, your blueprint class. Sorry, I'm just messing up all the engines now in my mind. So yeah, just convert selection after you do this merging of objects, which are just basically the same, and you want to make sure that they're not taking more draw calls. I wouldn't be too concerned in this specific situation because those are small objects. They share the same material. And yeah, it would be more important for you to bother about having material instances than doing this kind of merge, right? Material instance is another strategy that you can use to optimize your porting of assets. Okay, so that's one strategy. Let me undo that. Not the creation itself. I can just delete this reference. I'll leave this here. And we still got the, oh, nope. Apparently I had deleted those ones. Okay. Okay. So now, again, we got the separated torches. And I select them all. And I'll do the actor. And let's do the merge actors, but now I use batch. And this is batching. This will use instancing. And instancing is one of the most powerful things you can do to optimize your geometry processing, especially for when it's something duplicated like vases and such. And I'm going to be showing you guys some strategies for that. So yeah, let me click on batch. And you see it created the merge one here. This time, I think it created the same time. No, SM merge. Okay. So static mesh merge large one torches. So let me take those and I'm not sure it created here. No, give me a second, let me, because I think that's the other asset. Did it replace that or not? Let's see. Let me just undo that. Create a folder so I don't mess up merge. Then I'm sure what I'm doing. Move here. And let's just get all of those and go with actor, merge actors, and yeah, let's write batch again. But generate an actor with instance static mesh components. It should, but I don't see the actor being created. That's the problem. Well, maybe it failed silently. Let's check the output log. Not so silently, I hope. Valid asset counts from one validator. Validating assets. It did validate it. Check. It's hmm. it it's telling me that it validated the same asset as before. So maybe it's linking to that merged one. Usually what it does, it creates a new asset, but maybe because of previous operation, it's just applying the instancing to that actor. Let me check that do it again. Yeah, here it's shown as a single static mesh. I don't see the instances there. Or maybe just failed. Well, we can try doing that with the walls. Let's see if I get a different result. So let me try. First, try doing that with the walls that I know they share textures and geometry pieces because those are all a bunch of blocks of the same type. Not sure. Of course, it has to find the matching patterns by itself. It is not as perfect as if you do it yourself, right? So, because just a procedure. So here we have them. Let me add the separates folder here. That's one thing that I really missed in Unity. It's pretty easy to do in Unreal Engine. Create a folder. You have to create a game object for that. Let me drag them, add them here, and move them into the folder. It's not letting me scroll. Okay. All right. So let me try applying that to these two. Let's see what we get. Merge batch. Yeah, I got a message there blinking, but apparently it didn't find any match. It's pretty quick. So can't know 100% for sure. But apparently it failed. Like it couldn't batch those two guys. Whenever it can do it, it does it a pretty efficient job of instantiating the mesh. But yeah, I don't see instance mesh here anywhere. So apparently it didn't work with those meshes, right? Your mileage may vary, depends on the asset type, but that's an interesting technique and feel free to explore it further for your needs. You can also use batching, simplify, like I said, and approximate. The approximation will also bake textures, but it will lower the resolution of the mesh. You can use that for a bunch of reasons. Maybe it's just too heavy and you're not using a night or something, and then you could approximate. It's not, super useful right now because of Nanite actually. There's some options here. Let's see for batch. Mesh components be incorporated in the merge. Yeah, you see, it just didn't match. So yeah, so it basically didn't find any matching. You could try lowering the threshold so it becomes more aggressive. Um, I'm kind of surprised that it didn't work for the torches though. Should have worked for the torches. Let's try just one more time. So here's the selection. Yeah, it's still resulting in no instances being created. I'm not sure if it's because they're not actors, they're static matches, but it should work as well. Actor resistance, source actors, components. Yeah, we're gonna be talking about those in a second. No need to use age lot really. No need for that. Let me use. Oh, okay. So I lowered that to 0. It actually snapped back to 1. And then it allowed for 8 instance static mesh components. So yeah, it was the threshold. It was way too aggressive. You could also switch the class so that it generates static mesh actors instead of actors. So just do the static mesh actors selection here and do the merge actor pass. Oh, no, it didn't. It didn't work anymore just because it switched it to static. Okay, so we have to use actor. No way around that. Merge actors and created one instance actor. All right, so that's the actor which was generated. Let's look into it. Okay, let's zoom in and you can see that the output mesh is basically perfect. No problem with that. And now we can just get rid of the original, which are actually disabled, apparently. Invisible. Here's the actor. I just reset its position. Fine. And now we got this um, in place of the source meshes, but now using just one actor and with instancing. That's the best possible scenario because it's just literally one geometry source being replicated into. It's almost like a shader with vertex offset in its duplicates. So you definitely want to use that as much as possible. And sometimes it's tough with multiple part objects like those. You can try arranging those parts separately beforehand, just so you don't have this kind of be forced to use the algorithm. But at least it's got Unreal Engine provides you with the tool to do that, and which other engines, as far as I know, don't do that for free. You have to buy a plugin or something, right? So yeah, pretty handy as well. All right, so we talked about the interchange problem, FBX format. Let me show you guys real quick the workflow in Maya, and then we'll go and I'm gonna show a little bit more of how to bring the things into Unreal and checking the performance in the other projects. And just check the time real quick so I don't get lost with time. I got so many screens open that's kind of tough to even find my clock at the moment, believe it or not. Zoom never helps me. Keeps taking too much space. Yeah, okay, 3:12. We still have a little bit of time. So, Yeah, let me go to Maya. So here in Maya, it's basically the same thing. Well, it's not the same thing, but it's very similar to what you'd be doing in Blender, which is, well, let me show both. I probably start with Blender. So here's one asset pack that I downloaded from a free um, site, which is actually pretty cool. Let me give you guys the link. It's I think I have it open. It's open game art. Let me find it. Yeah, that one. Okay, so here's the link. You can search for content, free 3D castle, uh, dungeon type set. I place that in chat, right? Um, yeah. So I'm just laughing about last comment there. So true, huh? So, all right. Um, so obviously it's free. You can't complain about the quality of the asset. That's not the worst that I've seen, honestly. It's pretty decent. So yeah, let me show you guys. Basically, I downloaded that and I imported it. No, no hassle. Just importing. No big news. Just come in here and import and you select the FBX. Actually, this is in Blender, so I had to export to FBX. Yeah, the original was in Blender. Now I remember that. So let me go to Blender. That's the source file. So I just selected a couple of them, of those parts, which I wanted to export. I didn't want to export everything. There's lots, which is honestly just, redundant. What I didn't do when I exported it the first time was I didn't actually do an optimization pass. I should have done it. But if I select like one of those, let me go back to object mode. So if I select one of those pieces like this one, and I want to export that, you can. And the trick is, obviously doing cleanup is important. Like I said, you can go to the modeling tab and within object, you have the cleanup path. Um, Many times you have to go to vertex polygon selection mode to the edit mode to be able to do some of the better cleanup operations like delete loose, decimate and round, etc., etc. Merge by distance is very important. I do it always when I'm doing it seriously. This was just a quick pass. But yeah, especially you see no vertices removed. You can do merge vertices. Also, no, nothing happened. Let's see if something else we can do here. Mesh cleanup. You have the generate dissolve, which basically gets rid of zero length edges and vertices, etc. No result as well. But yeah, you should do this kind of cleanup pass before trying to export your assets. That's obviously very important. So I just selected some of those, and when you want to export it, and you go to export FBX, the main thing, really, and I got a couple here previously exported, is to limit to selected objects so that it doesn't export everything that you don't want. And if it's limited to selected objects, you don't need to care much about the object types. You can just export what's selected, right? And even though it's kind of, looks strange that you're selecting minus Z forward and Y up, because if you look at Blender's coordinate system, it's Y forward and Z up, right? But in a real engine, it's um, minus Y forward. Actually, yeah, minus Y is back, but it's the positive sense of the Y axis, and Z is up. So you might be tempted to change those to Unreal Engine coordinates, but don't. Just keep it as is because that's It'll basically map it to the standard used by Maya, Motion Builder, Autodesk applications which actually were the originator of the format. So you don't want to mess with that, right? I do not use apply transform most commonly. And then you select export and it generates the asset. Okay. So in Maya, let's import that in Maya. Of course, uh, it needs to be FBX or OBJ, but it cannot be .blend. And I just import the parts to, I think parts one, I had some issue. Optimally for Unreal Engine, you want to have exported, imported your smoothing groups. I wouldn't care much about the rest, honestly. As for scale factor, if it's showing centimeters, that's perfect. That's what you need, right? And just click import. Okay, so here are the pieces. Obviously, they're overlapping polygons and the mesh is not super clear. Yeah, it should be cleaned up before exporting, but here are the pieces. And you see that the hierarchy is not there. It's like just a flat list of pieces, but it imports just fine. If you go and export from there, if you have something created in Maya, I would recommend not using the export selection, but using the game exporter instead. It's a superior option when you're dealing with game assets. It's pretty simplified, organized. It's just better overall. Um, okay, so how about tangents and binormals? It's a good thing to explore them. You don't need skinning, you don't need blend shapes if it's just a mesh, of course. Um, do not smooth mesh if you're not using subdivision. So yeah, no need for that on low poly mesh. Smoothing groups, Unreal Engine expects for that. If it gives you a warning, it's because it generated its own. As for triangulation, it's a pretty common point of discussion. Should I triangulate before exporting or not? So I've seen assets exported, especially by Japanese studios. They are really adamant about triangulating everything um, before sending to the game engine. And I honestly agree that you cannot replicate the normal map perfectly unless you triangulate it from the same application where you projected the normal map. So if you did that in, for instance, in ZBrush, you better make sure the mesh is triangulated before you do the project all procedure, right? So that you get the best possible result. Because part of the final effect of the normal map depends on the order of triangulation in the sense that if one application sliced the mesh like that and the other application sliced it in triangles like that, the result is different, right? Especially on curved surfaces because of the nature of how normal map works and with all the highlights and things, like surfaces like those, they tend to give trouble in terms of the normal map shading. You might get some rips, some problems. So, but for honestly, for really sharp surfaces or mechanical things or robots and such, I wouldn't bother. The difference is mostly in file size. Triangulated objects, they definitely take a more size. You got more information, right? To define the triangles instead of the quads, you have roughly double. But yeah, if it's not a big um, file, it's no big deal. And obviously, if you're dealing with a really high density mesh, especially for Nanite, I wouldn't even think about that. Okay. But overall, you could just do a direct export. I don't have animations. You could just save animations here, and yeah, no subclips for animations defined. And just select directory and click export. Okay. Pretty simple. All right, so let's bring it over now to Unreal Engine. Let me create And I do this here before we open the final project and we discuss how to deal with those assets in a really dense scene in terms of lighting and everything going on. Let me just do, I just create a temp folder. Oh, and by the way, once you have this done, I forgot to mention, um, after you import it and you got either the static mesh or whatever you want to import or the blueprint, um, basically we got the blueprint class, the original one that we selected. You can just select everything, right? And then you right click and you go to asset actions and you do migrate. Let me repeat that. Select everything, Control A, Control click to deselect folders. Right click, asset actions, and just go to migrate. Okay. And then with everything that's here selected, if there's something you just think it shouldn't be there, actually it just included materials which previously existed. It included levels. I don't care about the level there. And yeah, let me not send this to. So I just send a blueprint and the meshes, select what you want. And then you click Save Selected. What you need to do is, okay, this is what's going to be migrated in the same hierarchy. Like if you have a Games 3D, it's going to create a castle and everything in there. Otherwise, it'll just, copy the files if you already have the castle there. So just click OK, and it's going to ask you where does it have to migrate that to. And then you select your real project, and then you go to the content folder. Make sure to select content. You cannot place that at the root. Just select content. And yeah, you can just do a select folder or directly, which is what I recommend. Right? I wouldn't recommend navigating inside it. You don't need to. It's going to replicate the same hierarchy that I have here. Just click select folder. And do not be scared about things disappearing here. That's an ancient bug in Unreal Engine, which is completely innocuous. It won't harm you in any ways. Just click elsewhere and click back again. And you're going to see that things are there. Just sometimes it takes some time and then it shows up, right? But anyways, it didn't really delete your thing, even though it seems like it did. Sometimes you have to even reboot the Unreal Engine editor. It's kind of crazy. But anyways, so we got that migrated and now I can get back to our importing here. So let me move this to temp and yeah, let me bring the asset. Where's the asset? Um, have some things going on at the same time, so I have to find the right folder. That's not it. That's already imported. That's also not it. I think I got some 20 Explorer folders open now. I have to find that. Nope, not you. Hmm. Let's see, maybe here. Yeah. Yeah, it's here. Okay, so let me bring in the 3D tile set parts too. And same deal. I just import all. And yeah, I'm gonna complain about some things. These like tangent bases, zero binormals, is because of small errors in the mesh. So I didn't model them. Don't blame me. That's just a free asset. So yeah, let's not complain about the free horse we just gained. But let me yeah, so here are the materials created. Of course, they don't have the textures assigned or anything, and that'll be up to you, to assign them the first time. But what we really should be concerned about is this is the actual meshes brought in. So let me take the simplest one and let me also get rid of you. We don't need that. I'll move that into test and just disable that. Okay. So, all right, let me get either that or I don't know, it's kind of simplistic, but okay, whatever. Let me drag this in. Okay, so here's the mesh. And of course, I would migrate it to my final project in the same fashion. But one thing that really helps, and by really, I mean really, really helps, is to have snapping. Because, depending on the size of the mesh, it's kind of hard. Let me show you guys what I mean. First, I send it to 0, 0 in the world. And here's the pivot point. You see that the pivot point is not exactly at a corner. And that's unfortunately pretty common in some assets. In this case, you can, for instance, hold Alt and drag, and then you see the result and you're like, okay, let me place it roughly where it should be, right? And then you can read the location and you may guess that, oh, it's 200 units. Fine. So I can just, move it 200 units. It's going to snap perfectly because it was a well-built asset. And you can, you know, um, you have some snap settings, but they're not, super nitty-gritty at times. So you might not be super happy with the granularity they got here. So yeah, basically it would be moving things and then using multiples of the width or creating a tool with instance meshes. So I couldn't get into the detail, but basically for optimization of meshes inside Unreal Engine, you have two approaches. One is using instance static meshes, and the other is the hierarchical instance static meshes. And those are actually more commonly called as ISMs and HISMs. What's the difference between them? Basically, ISMs are the regular ones. They do not support LODs or LODs or level of detail, which are basically lower density versions of the same mesh for different distances to the camera. So if this shape was really far away, you wouldn't need that much geometry. So Real Engine can even generate those automatically for you. Um, but that's the trick. It keeps, it lowers the density, and Nanite does that automatically, right? And a much better fashion than any LOD system can do, because LOD systems are static and in the sense that it just have a certain number of versions of the same mesh, right? So it's for Nanite usage, instance static meshes are better. To say it, since 5.4, it has been optimized so that you want to use regular ISMs for Nanite. If you're building for mobile, you want to use IJSMs. That's a really simplistic way to think about it. Of course, there are more differences, but since time is short for us, I'm trying to make it really simple and clear to you. Like that's number one thing you should be thinking about. Am I using A9? Is my game targeting Windows platforms, PC, last gen consoles, etc.? Or is it targeting mobile devices? For mobile devices, there are some things which ISMs basically will not support as well. Some shader optimization, some specifics, and of course it depends on the target platform, but it is more restrictive. Um, so you want to use LODs and not Nanites. And LODs, age ISMs. And for Nanite, use regular ISMs. And Unreal Engine has a really powerful system where you can create those copies, but not as copies, using instances, right? Using ISMs or age ISMs if you're seeing as Nanite enabled. Be warned that if for optimization you disable Nanite, the the ISM system might fail, right? It's one of its constraints. And but anyways, what I wanted to show you guys is a really simple way for you to set the snapping, um, which I personally think is useful. So let me show you really quick how to do that. Instead of messing with numbers, supposing you're not using, because you could, instead of setting up your own optimization system, for HISMs, you could just use the actor batching like I've just shown, right? So that you have like a number of those, and then you manually place those and create this big scenario. And at the end of it, you just select everything and do this actor batching from merging, right? And just adjust the threshold like it did, and it's gonna optimize the scene for you. It won't be dynamic, as in PCG or procedural content generation, but it'll be super performant at the end of it. So what I want to what I want to show you guys is how to prepare your assets inside Unreal for it to be easy to snap around and for you to compose your scenes. And obviously, messing with numbers like I did here is not the best way. And fighting off the grid system, which is pretty, pretty hard coded here. I don't have 200s, for instance, might be a problem. You might have to mess with your assets. You might not be able to adjust the assets to fit whatever size you need. So what's the second best option? It's to set the pivot of the source mesh at one of its actual corners, right? So that you can snap to vertices. And that's not the case currently. So let's use, for instance, this vertex here, right? How am I going to do that? Okay, so a couple of things. There are two configurations for pivots. The pivot is the center of the object where it orbits around. And one of those is temporary. It's basically set per instance. The other one is actually baked into the mesh. So the one baked into the mesh is the one you want, so that you're not forced to keep duplicating the same instance in your outlier that you set the temporary pivot to. So let's do it. And I show both actually. So if you go to move to, and you hold middle mouse button, you can set the temporary pivot. As you're dragging it, if you click V, it won't do anything like in Unity. In Unity, the shortcut is V to snap vertices. But if you hold Alt, and it's kind of tricky, you cannot hold Alt and later click middle mouse button. You have to click both. So it takes a little bit of coordination. It's harder than in Unity, I know. But if you do it right, and you see that little grabbing hand icon, it now actually gets to the temporary set pivot mode where you can hold the V key. You see, it's kind of like an exercise. I'm still holding Alt, I'm still holding middle mouse button, then I can select the temporary pivot. Okay, that's one way. There's an easier one, which is much easier actually. You can go to Snap-in and select Vertex. That's a newer option actually. And then you can just Alt middle mouse button and it's gonna snap. So that's one less hand gymnastics away for you to do it. Once you do that, and by the way, if you have difficulty doing that, if you're in a big scenario, make sure to right click, go to visibility and select show only selected, right? So that's going to hide everything. And then you go back later after you set the pivot and you go to visibility and you show all actors or hit Control H, the shortcut. Okay, that's one way. But since the scene is empty, it's very easy to do that. So now you right click the mesh and you go to pivot and use the first option, set this pivot offset. Okay, awesome. So this is the temporary pivot. From now on, if I do like Alt and I move, since I got pivot snapping, it's doing the work for me pretty easily, right? So I can just Alt, click, drag, and just snap. Very easy, right? I can even rotate from there 90 degrees. I can use like snapping rotation to make it easier. And same deal. I just move and hold Alt. Here we go. Snap. Okay, pretty easy. And there's actually a shape here to fit this gap in case you guys are ears, you can use it. But that's not as good as having this into the baked onto the mesh. Because if I drag it here now, you can see that the original pivot is back to where it was. So you're basically stuck to setting temporary pivot and just working from those instances. And not the best flow, because if you're working with other artists, they will just need to be using that instance, and in other different levels, different scenes, you would have to set up the pivot again. Pretty annoying. So let me show you guys another way to do that, which will be basically baking it. So I move that to here, basically at or set that to 0, but it's not. It's like, okay, let me start this over because that's just not real. I was able snapping just really quick and I reset the position. Okay, now that's the reality of the actual mesh. So here in the top left drop down, you have the selection mode. That's the default where we're just changing from move, rotate, etc. And you got the place actor options. And if you don't get this layout, by the way, I prefer it for some reasons. One of them is that it changes according to the mode that you're using, which there are some shortcuts for here. You can just go to Window, Load Layout, and use the UE4 classic layout, right? By default, Unreal Engine 5 comes with the content browser is not to be seen as something like this, and there's no place actors, so it's more like this, right? But yeah, I prefer the old layouts where you have this kind of like a brush selector all the time. But that's up to you, just a suggestion. But anyways, when I select here the modeling mode, you see that it shows that in the same tab of place actors, and you have waves, create, where you can create shapes inside the same 3D mesh. But most importantly, here in Xform, you get the edit pivot option. And once you added the pivot and you hit accept, this actually modifies the static mesh asset. So it overrides whatever is defined here. So use it with care. I recommend duplicating it first, the asset, Control C, Control V, and then editing the copy if you're not sure of what you're doing, if you don't have experience with that. Once you're used to it, no big deal, right? But yeah, from starters, just don't try to be too brave. So there's some options here because it's just moving around. Fortunately, the snapping option doesn't work here. So even if you enable snap vertex, which would be awesome, I think they will fix that sometime or just integrate it, but yeah, it just won't work, right? It won't snap in this mode of editing pivot. So what can we do? You see there are some presets, but they're like just center, top, bottom, right, back, front. There's nothing like bottom left corner. Even then, I wanted to snap to this to this pivot, right? So what I would recommend is this. Let me cancel that, and let's do that in two steps. I got back to selection. I'm gonna set the temporary pivot mode. So to do it quicker, I just enable the vertex snappings, already enabled, Alt middle drag, just place it here and right click, pivot, set as pivot offset. Awesome. So we have it set as temporary. Now, if I try to snap to the origin, there's no, immediate option here to do that, but you can just right click and select snapping, snap origin to grid. And the trick is to move it as close to the origin as possible. Let me just disable the rotation and disable vertex for now. So let's move it roughly close to the center of the world and then snap origin to grid. And it's going to snap exactly to the center of the world. All right. And then we're going to use the second part of the trick. don't blink or you might miss. Just go to selection modeling again, pivot, X-form actually, and edit pivot, and we'll use world origin. And then it snaps exactly to the vertex that you want. Okay, so after you do the accept, the the temporary pivot might, fool you, but this has been baked onto the actual static mesh. So you can, if I drag another copy, let me delete this one, you can just reset the position and you're going to be seeing it exactly where it should be. And now with Vertex snapping enabled, you get the best possible. Let me just get back selection. You got the best possible option, which is just Alt, drag, and snap precisely. Okay. And even if you instantiate it again in another scene, whatever, the pivot is correct. You can just rotate it, just re-enable snap rotation, and there you go. And you can just snap to the right place every time, right? So you do that just once for each of those assets and assemble your scene quickly, right? Okay, so that's the tricks I wanted to show here. Let me, I think I'll save that. Let me reopen before we wrap this up. I had much more to talk about, but time will not allow. So let me reopen GP12 because I want to show um, some some of the performance losses that you guys might face when doing really quick or really complex actually setup of scenes. And actually from those textures, let me just briefly show as it loads, if I can. Let me show you guys that. So of course there are some, normal maps and for the textures, let me show you that. So yeah, you already got the normal maps and for the tiles, for the wall, it's not the best possible quality, but there's something in there, which might be good enough for what you want or not. But I want to show you this. That one's basically a photograph. But what I want to show you is how this too can speed up your workflow. And so basically here you can get within main, you can get from any map. And I do recommend starting from normal, unless you don't have a normal map, right? Then you can just select normal and Control G, select one of those normal maps, probably. Yeah, I'm gonna get this ground normal. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a height derivative of the height map of the normal map, and you can check it in here. What's the result? Of course, you can do that on Substance Painter as well. Just find it easier and faster to do that here. And even though I can't, let's see if I can rotate enough. And that's the tessellation level. It's how much it's gonna tessellate that. And let me try sphere or no, plane maybe. Nah, not good enough. Mesh, you can select any mesh where you want to try that on. Just use a cylinder. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's, yeah, not easy to see, but it actually adds relief. It actually adds detail to those shapes and depth, right? So you can here in the integrator section of the tool, because it does generate from this map, generates image occlusion, concavity, convexity, all the maps that you need. Instantly use your GPU for that. And you can just increase the iterations to get um, better detailing, or most importantly, you can increase the bump scale, right? And when you basically when you do that, your height map becomes more intense. So the goal here is to generate those maps. Just upgrade the integrator. Yeah, here in export, you select the format like PNG, 8 bits, it propagates for everything. Select what you want. Oh, I just want the height, or I want height and AO or convexity, etc. Select export path. And you can just export that. Okay. And let me just increase bump scale because I want this. I want more relief. That's the kind of thing which you want to add to an asset within Nanite. So if you export this mesh, this texture, this height map, and use that in any mesh, of course, you would want to make sure that it's stylable. I think it is. I don't know. I haven't checked that in Photoshop, although it's easy. Just use the offset filter and apply an offset on X and Y and see if it tiles. Otherwise, you fix it. But yeah, once it's stylable, I think it is, right? And I just scroll around, I think it wraps properly. You can have the mesh be generated for Nanite using displacement. That's a new feature since 5.4. And you can get all this detail, real depth, not just normal map, right? If that's what you want. Of course, it has a cost. It's not as it's not as effective if you're guessing as bringing in the pre-deformated or pre-tessellated mesh into the system, but it takes way less space on disk. So it really depends on what you're doing. For some applications like you know, terrain, you might want it because it would be dynamic. You'd be able to add footsteps, for instance, actually, imagine footsteps on the snow where you're actually deforming the terrain. Okay, that it makes sense that the terrain is deformed using a height map. And then you can just add your height map um, to generate this detail instead of bringing that baked into the mesh, right? Which is what Nanite by definition does. So yeah, let me explore this real quick just so you can take a look at the height that's been used there. Yeah, there you go. That's a generated height map. And of course, there are other tools where you can just bump the resolution. I recommend you guys checking out upscale if your source resolution it's too slow. I can find it here. Some reason upscale. It's some. I'm pretty sure I didn't install it. Maybe I did. Anyways, that's the name of the app. You can look it up. Upscale. It's a free application for you to generate high resolution textures from lower resolution ones. So that's something else you can do if you're going for height maps from a certain normal map, which is not super, high res. So yeah, feel free to use it. Um, and okay, let's get back to the scene. And let me finally show you guys what I meant by performance digging really quick. Yeah, let me just enable. So here you see how it's totally different ball game. We're at roughly slightly above 30 frames per second. Let me pause it. And yeah, 33, 34 frames per second. You see that we're slightly below the budget, which is, the lower in milliseconds it takes your frame, the higher the frame rate. So they're basically um, opposite to each other. So yeah, but this is definitely not super fast, right? And you see, I'm not even playing the game. I'm just rotating the camera around and watch the difference when I'm, for instance, facing directly the wall. Let me try to zoom in closer, and you can use right click and WASD. It'll probably be easier. Okay, so now I'm 46, 47. So it got much cheaper to draw it, right? that tells me that with all the particles and such that I'm getting, the FPS dropped. And as I look into another section, another part of the map, the performance drops even more. And now it's below 30 frames per second, and I start getting those alerts. And if I zoom out and I start seeing other chunks, then you see how things get really bad. Like this is at 20 frames per second. I'm zooming even out. I'm seeing more of the map, more of the level. And now I'm below 20 frames per second, 17, 20, right? So that's what happens when your culling is not properly set, or your geometry is not optimized, or a combination of all of those factors, right? This is pretty poor. Okay. And of course, this game is not meant to be played from that angle, but even at a typical angle of play where you have this is a kind of like a vampire servant. It's one of the games that we're playing, that we're working in our GDP classes. And next, I want to add some Nanite in action, and just adding the depth, the detailing. It'll be the next steps. So I know Matthew is here, so he's probably hearing that we're going to be doing that. But yeah, we got AI working for this character, pushing the player, and but even if I hit play here, you see that, with everything going on, with the shaders and motion matching and AI running, this is not optimized. So we got cloth going, we got, multiple things. And most noticeably, it's the depth here of multiple parts of the map being seen. Oh my God, he spotted me. No, get off me. Get off me. No, take that. All right, so we stop playing my own game. But anyways, so well, oh my God, he's here. But leave me alone. Come on. Yeah, I'll pause. Okay, he can't get me now. But yeah, we got this FPS here. Let me eject real quick and to see how, you know, when I have more of my screen taken up close, it's not too bad. But as I zoom out and get more things going, especially at a distance, I get this kind of problem. So this part um, of the performance that you can handle with game design. So imagine map design actually. Imagine instead of seeing this door at a distance, I was I had just a lower or longer corridor going down, or just a door blocking sight, which you had to go and go through and go back. Then you guys are probably guessing, oh, that's why games have so many doors. And you'll be right, because it literally prevents you from dealing with long distance assets, which have their own particles and lots of things go in just a handful of pixels in comparison to the big area, right? So yeah, that's the kind of consideration that I have to go to do. And to wrap this conversation up, one of the first things I would do, since now I know that it's visuals, it's not logic, it's doing the batching pass and making sure the particles take a big chunk of performance. You can always check what's taking the most here within unit. You can see how the frame is taking much more than the game, okay, and the draw, I mean, and contributing. So it's basically the opposite of our task in the other scene, because now it's a real game with everything going on. And that's when you start considering all the optimization techniques for lighting, for, not using um, cascading shadow maps, um, baking lighting. It's one of the best possible things you can do to optimize your rendering, and adding doors, like I said, is typical solution, that kind of thing. And yeah, and batching. So those would be the passes that I would recommend you guys thinking about when porting, when optimizing it. And yeah, and just try to have fun and make sure you're looking into the right debugging stats so that you get the best possible information to guide you through what you need to optimize first, so you don't waste time. So you can see like, oh, is it shadowing? Is it deferred shading? what's taking most of the rendering time, right? So you have all these great debugging options, which you can, disable lumen if it's lighting, it's the problem. The global illumination lighting has its toll as well. So detect what's taking most of your frame time and attack that first. If it's logic, optimize things, disable ticking for actors which don't need continuous ticking, and so on and so forth. Let me just hide all and um, yeah, I shut this down because it's taken a toll on my poor CPU. The fan is screaming on me, so yeah, I'm done. So, all right, let me check. If you guys want to talk, feel free to talk. Otherwise, I just take a quick look on the questions here. Let's see where my okay, just saw the messages here. That just started the game. Ta-da-da-da. Unity display model assets. Yeah, some aspects in Unity are just simpler. The rule of thumb, Laura, is always think about Unreal Engine as the best possible end game you can have for game development. It's not the easiest to get things set up first. It's not the easiest learning curve. It is not. I won't lie here, but it's definitely the best visuals you can get. You got the best tooling, the best animation tool set. You can literally animate entire scenes. You can create all the character animations inside it. You can, for instance, not sure if you saw in that scene, but we have the foot planted as the character moves with motion matching and all the dynamics and everything that's complicated in a Unreal Engine. It's literally like one click away, while things which just take one click in other engines might take 5 or 10 clicks in a Unreal Engine. So yeah, it's a different approach to game development. It's an older engine. It's the most mature of all engines in terms of release time and amount of features. So there's lots of I would say legacy code in there, which they keep supporting, and slowly they are replacing it. But Unity's interface is more integrated in a sense. Like it's very rare they find the situations like you saw where snapping works here, but it won't work there. Snapping is globally available, for instance. So yeah, you have these kinds of discrepancies in Unreal Engine that you have and quirks that you have to learn how to deal with. But yeah, the final result kind of speaks for itself. Hollywood's not using anything but Unreal Engine right now. Yeah, the recording is definitely gonna be available for you guys. Don't be concerned. Explaining things while doing is pretty incredibly hard. Yeah, Rachel had to take off. Yeah, you got the link for the video. And yeah, that's it. If you guys have any further questions, feel free to send it. If you're curious about Vertex, the course itself, make sure to reach out to our staff. Links are on Vertex School, the link that you guys found here. And the link to the video recording should be available to you in the next couple of days, usually sometimes earlier, right? Well, that's it, guys. If you have no further questions, I hope it was interesting and it helps your workflow and your transition if you're transitioning into Unreal or your regular work if you keep working with assets from other DCC apps and bringing them into Unreal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Jeff. And talk to you soon, I hope. Cheers.
Thanks, Breno. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Cole. Bye-bye.